What if I told you there's this one idea, this one philosophy, that totally flipped the script on how we make, well, pretty much everything? From the car you're driving to the phone in your pocket, there was a revolutionary idea that took manufacturing out of the dark ages. We're talking about the Taguchi Method.
Now, to really wrap your head around why this was such a massive breakthrough, you have to understand the old way of doing things. For the longest time, making stuff was basically a gamble. You'd make a huge batch of products and just cross your fingers, knowing a big chunk would probably end up in the scrap heap. The new way? It's not about hoping for the best. It's about planning for perfection from the very first sketch.
All right, so let's really dig into that old way of doing things, that flawed system. Because for decades, this wasn't just one way to do it. It was pretty much the only way. And man, was it wasteful.
I mean, picture this. You're on a factory line. You build thousands of things, and then someone at the very end just sorts them into a good pile and a bad pile. It's crazy, right? Companies were literally planning to fail, pouring massive amounts of time, money, and materials into fixing problems that were already built right into the product.
You know, a system that wasteful, it was just screaming for a change. And this is where our story's hero, a Japanese engineer named Dr. Genichi Taguchi, steps onto the scene. He looked at this whole messy process and thought, come on, there has to be a smarter way.
And his core idea, well, it was so simple, yet it was absolutely revolutionary. He basically said, let's stop chasing defects after they happen and start preventing them from the get-go. In his mind, quality isn't something you inspect for at the end, it's something you design into the products from day one. That was a total game changer.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? Well, his whole method is built on a few really brilliant, really powerful core principles. First up is this idea of robustness, and it's a fantastic concept. Think about your phone, right? A really well-designed, robust phone works just as well whether you're on a scorching hot beach or up on a freezing cold mountain. It doesn't care about those outside noise factors. Taguchi's goal wasn't to get rid of all the noise in the world. That's impossible. But to design products that are so tough, they just ignore it. See, before Taguchi, engineers kind of had this goalpost way of thinking. You know, like in football. If a part needed to be 10 millimeters long, anything between, say, 9.9 and 10.1, close enough. It's in the goalposts. It's a good part. It was just pass or fail.
Taguchi just threw that whole idea out the window with something he called the loss function. He said that any little deviation from the perfect target, no matter how tiny, creates a loss. Think about a car door that's just a hair off. It's technically within spec, but it creates that tiny bit of wind noise on the highway. That's a small loss, right? But it's a loss to the customer every single day. The new goal wasn't just to get it between the goalposts, it was to hit the dead center of the target. Every single time.
And what's so cool about this philosophy is how flexible it is. It's not a one-size-fits-all deal. For some things, like the size of a precision part, you want to nail a specific target. That's nominal the best. For others, like pollution coming out of a factory, smaller is always better. And for something like the strength of a steel beam, well, larger is always better. This loss function gives engineers a universal way to shoot for perfection no matter what they're building.
All right, so the philosophy is amazing. But, you know, a great idea is just an idea without the tools to actually make it happen. And this is where Taguchi really delivered. He gave engineers a whole new toolkit to turn this vision into reality.
Probably the most important tool in that kit is the signal-to-noise ratio. Just think about tuning an old-school radio. The signal is the crisp, clear music you're trying to find. The noise is all that annoying static and interference. Taguchi realized you can measure this for any product. And by boiling it down to one single number, he gave engineers a super clear goal: crank up the signal and kill the noise.
But, of course, this led to a new problem. To find the most robust design, you got to experiment. And if you've got a complex product with tons of different variables, materials, settings, temperatures, the number of possible combinations can get completely out of hand fast. Let's say you have a product with just 7 different factors, and you want to test each one at 2 different levels. To do a full-blown experiment, you'd have to run 128 separate tests. Think about that. The time, the money, it's huge.
But with Taguchi's method, for the same thing, you only need to run 8. Just 8 experiments. Come on, from 128 down to 8. So, how on earth is that possible?
Well, the secret sauce here is something called orthogonal arrays. Now, the math behind them is pretty intense, but the idea itself is genius. Just think of them as the ultimate cheat sheet for doing experiments.
Instead of testing every single combination, these special tables let you test just a few clever combinations that give you the most possible information. It's like figuring out the best cake recipe by only baking a few strategically chosen cupcakes instead of 128 full cakes. You get almost all of the learning for a tiny fraction of the cost and effort.
Okay, so let's bring this out of the world of theory and see what it looks like in the real world. How did this new toolkit actually start designing a better world?
Let's look at a case study of a machining firm. They had a really common problem. Their drill bits were breaking way too often, costing them time and money. So, using the Taguchi method, they picked 3 things they could control: the cutting speed, the feed rate, and the coolant condition. They set up a super simple experiment using one of those orthogonal arrays to find the magic combination with the highest signal-to-noise ratio.
And boom, here are the results. This table shows the signal-to-noise ratio for each factor at different levels, and you don't have to be a math whiz to read this. You just look for the highest number in each row. For factor A, speed, level 2 wins. For factor B, feed rate, level 1 is the clear winner. And for factor C, coolant, it's level 2 again. The data literally hands them the perfect recipe for the most robust, efficient process. So what happened when they actually put this simple, data-backed change into practice? A whopping 40% increase in the life of their tools. That is a massive jump in efficiency and a huge cost saving, all from just a handful of smart, targeted experiments.
And here's the really important part. This way of thinking isn't just for making drill bits last longer. The Taguchi method has been used everywhere. It's given us more durable cars, medicines that are more stable, and electronics that just work consistently. It's a philosophy that not only saves companies a fortune, but also dramatically cuts down on waste, which is a huge win for everyone. So in the end, by completely changing the focus from catching mistakes at the end of the line to preventing them from ever happening in the first place, from good enough to as perfect as we can get it, Dr. Taguchi gave us more than just better stuff. He gave us a better way to solve problems.
And that really leaves us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? This whole method is a framework for making things strong and reliable, even when the world around them is messy and unpredictable. So if we take that idea out of the factory, what other really complex systems in our world, like healthcare or education, maybe even our public policies, could we design to be better right from the very start?